All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Sue Chiang, Director of the Food Program at CEH. And we're excited to have you here for the webinar on GreenScreen Certified for Reusables. This webinar is hosted by the Center for Environmental Health and Clean Production Action. I'm sure that many of you, and sorry, next slide, please. I'm sure that many of you are attending this webinar today because you're concerned about harmful chemicals such as PFAS, BPA, or styrene in food packaging, containers, or cookware. And these containers should look familiar. They're both common disposable foodware products. The top one is expanded polystyrene foam that has a cancer-causing chemical styrene as its main building block. And many have switched to what they thought were compostable molded fiber products made of sugarcane or bagasse, thinking that it was environmentally preferable, only to find out that it contained very harmful PFAS chemicals in it to make them water and grease resistant. Next slide. So, we know that there's the crises of plastic pollution, greenhouse gas production, health risks associated with single-use materials, and waste issues when the single-use materials are landfilled or incinerated, making it more important than ever to move towards safer, healthier, and circular methods of transporting, packaging, storing, and cooking our food. And while switching to reusables may help to avoid a number of issues that we have with disposable foodware or food packaging, we want to make sure that we aren't perpetuating or exacerbating the problem by buying reusables with toxic ingredients or products that don't end up being that durable and end up filling our landfills, for example. Next slide. To the average person, actually even to people like me who focus on toxic chemicals for my job, it can be overwhelming to have to worry about what might be in everyday products you come into contact with. And unfortunately, our system isn't set up for us to easily identify and avoid these harmful ingredients. It's difficult for purchasers to know what might be in the products they're buying, and even manufacturers don't often know all of the ingredients that are in their own products. Out of this concern, local and state governments have been passing laws to restrict various chemicals or chemical classes like PFAS from food packaging and food serviceware. And the problem is, though, we will continue to run into the problem of regrettable substitutes until we look at this in a more holistic way, which is why CEH and CPA developed the certification. Next slide. So if you're a business owner, purchaser, or individual looking to avoid harmful chemicals and invest in reusables, GreenScreen Certified is the place to identify reusable food serviceware, packaging, cookware, and containers with preferred chemistry. Companies applying for certification must disclose their full ingredient information under confidentiality and comply with a comprehensive list of prohibited substances. Food packaging, cookware, serviceware, and containers certified under the GreenScreen Reusable Standard must not contain intentionally added PFAS and thousands of other known hazardous chemicals. So I'm excited to introduce our speakers. Next slide. Mark Rossi is the Executive Director of Clean Production Action, who will start us off by explaining more about what is in the GreenScreen Certified Standard for Reusables and give you a little more detail about it. Then next, we'll hear from Dr. Manasa Mantravadi, who's the founder and CEO of Ahimsa, a company that has the first certified product under this new standard, and we'll talk about why they chose to get certified. And then Julia Wolfe, who's the Environmental Purchasing Director of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, will then speak and provide her perspective on why this type of tool is so important for purchasers. So with that, I will turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Sue, and it's great to be here with you and Julia and Manasa. Are you seeing my slides? Just to check that you're seeing them. No, share
Not yet.
screen, share.
Now we are.
Now you are. Okay, well, great. And Sue, as always, it's such a pleasure to be partnering with Center for Environmental Health on this really important initiative to identify environmentally preferred reusable products. And just briefly on myself and Clean Production Action, I'm the executive director at Clean Production Action, and I've been with CPA since 2004 in various roles. And prior to that, I was working at the Massachusetts Toxic Waste Reduction Institute. So Clean Production Action is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to design and deliver strategic solutions for green chemicals, sustainable materials, and environmentally preferable products. And we do that through 4 programs, 2 collaborations, BizNGO and the Investor Environmental Health Network, and 2 tools, the Chemical Footprint Project and GreenScreen. And today, our focus is on the work that we do through our GreenScreen program. And Sue had mentioned this, but I just really wanted to highlight, as we think about this transition from disposable single-use food serviceware products, which are typically plastic and are just thrown away and derived from fossil fuels, so have a whole life cycle of problems, that as we go to reusables, we don't have to worry about reusables. They're reusable, and therefore they're inherently more preferred than the single-use products. And so I just want to bring up sort of some regrettable reusables history, going back into the 2000s, and many of you may recall this. There was this concerns around BPA, bisphenol A, which is an endocrine disrupting compound and a reproductive toxicant that is in polycarbonate bottles, because BPA polycarbonate is made from polycarbonate, right? This bottle, the plastic bottle on my left, and so then there was this effort at saying, okay, well, that's a problem. Polycarbonate bottles are a problem. We should move to non-plastic alternatives. And then there was this movement to aluminum water bottles, and SIG USA was making a lot of increased sales dramatically. And you can see the details in the slide. I'm not going to walk through specifically through each bullet, but so SIG sales increased dramatically. But when it turned out that SIG actually had a coating in this aluminum bottle that itself contained BPA, and it became such a legal liability for SIG that the SIG USA subsidiary went bankrupt back in 2011. So this is why, it's really important to, as we think about this transition from disposables to reusables, to make sure that we're getting this right and we're not having regrettable reusables. So GreenScreen Certified is a program that was started with Clean Production Action back in 2017, building from our GreenScreen for Safer Chemicals, chemical hazard assessment method. And there's a number of organizations that are using or referencing our different product certifications. Apple, Kaiser Permanente, TCO certified, and many of the states we have. Massachusetts here, Michigan, Wisconsin, Connecticut, Colorado, Washington State have all either referenced or are preferring products that are GreenScreen certified. In many cases, it's been around firefighting foam and also the food serviceware standard. And you'll hear more from Julia about Massachusetts work around environmentally preferable purchasing. So, and as Sue said, it can get really challenging. How do you, think about, identify these chemicals of concern and preferred chemistries, alternatives. And what GreenScreen Certified is really, it's simplifying the complexity of communicating around chemicals in products. And so it makes it easier for purchasers and users to say, we want GreenScreen certified products because it meets our criteria and standards for environmentally preferred products. And then it provides a logo and an accreditation for manufacturers and suppliers to say, yes, we meet that product certification, and enhances the communication. And Sue pointed out some of the procurement pain points that purchasers come across in terms of thinking about the chemistry in the products. So one, it's a challenge to know all chemical ingredients in products because they're not disclosed publicly, and therefore, so you have to work individually with every supplier to get that information. There also are contaminants that are going to be there. So what types of contaminants are going to be there? Then what's the hazard profile, the toxicity characteristics of these chemicals? And then how do you evaluate that toxicity, right? And so GreenScreen Certified does all of that. And the value also is it's been done by independent third parties, Center for Environmental Health and Clean Production Action. It's a comprehensive and detailed evaluation, which we will walk you through. At the end of it, it's an easy to understand outcome. Is the product certified or not, and at what level? It does go well beyond PFAS-free chemistries, as I'll describe. It avoids regrettable substitutes and creates a roadmap to preferred chemistries. And we see that roadmap as really being important to provide a trajectory on the pathway to preferred products. So creating a product certification standard is a much larger effort than I ever imagined when we started down this process. CEH and Clean Production Action started, as Stu mentioned, with single-use food serviceware products, and then we've been working on the reusable food serviceware products. It takes about 2.5 years. We have to develop the standard. We have to test that with manufacturers. We have it reviewed by an independent peer review body. You can see the members here. It's a mixture of NGOs, government agencies, academic, and industry experts. So very much a mixture of individuals from organizations with a lot of experience in the food serviceware space. And they all review it. They provide feedback. We have to then go and address their comments to get to a finalized standard. And so the finalized standard has 7 core components that I was just going to walk you through today. One scope, well, I'm going to walk you through all of these, but you can see them there. In the interest of time, I'll just dive right into these. You can go and download the standard on Clean Production Action's website with GreenScreen Chemicals or CEH's website. The first scope, what can be certified? So you can certify the products, and you can certify the materials that are going into the product. So the products in this case are reusable food serviceware, food storage, food packaging, and or cookware products. And we wanted to add in cookware because of the concerns about PFAS in cookware products, and then what's being used if you have PFAS-free cookware. So it provides a standard for evaluating cookware products. And any materials to use those products can individually be certified. So some, key definitions. I mean, there's a lot of definitions. They're all in the standard, but one is reusable. It turned out to be a much more challenging definition to come to land on and get an alignment with the peer review committee. I thought it would be rather straightforward, but really there certainly is not a national standard. There's a few state-based standards that are out there. There isn't a European standard. So we adopted the Cal Recycle standard of the product must maintain its shape, structure, and function after 780 cycles in a cleaning and sanitizing process. So we adopted what Cal Recycle had adopted. And for PFAS, we've adopted the definition that has been adopted by many states. Washington State, Oregon, Minnesota, et cetera, have legislation that adopted the definition of PFAS, which are the per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, a class of fluorinated organic chemicals containing at least one fully fluorinated carbon atom. So we just want to make sure that the products are tested and do not have intentionally added PFAS. This next one, the product inventory, is really a critical element, and it's something that really makes the certification process valuable because manufacturers, suppliers, brands that want to get a product certified must disclose all intentionally added chemicals in a product. So if they're intentionally added, it has to be at above 1 part per million. It has to be disclosed. If it's an impurity or residual, it has to be disclosed at 100 parts per million. So this, and we, Clean Production Action, does sign non-disclosure agreements with companies so that they feel comfortable disclosing that information. We hold that information privately, and then we evaluate the product to the standard criteria, which is publicly available. So the standard and the criteria that we use to evaluate the product is all publicly available. So one of the thresholds, so the company discloses everything that's in the product. The first step is, does it have any chemicals on this very comprehensive set of restricted substances list? And I wanted to point out, I put this all here just to give you a sense of scope. But there's 16 chemical classes, including PFAS, including halogenated flame retardants, including bisphenol, BPA, analogs, phthalates, etc. You can see the list. And then number 17 is we have another list of other chemicals of concern, which includes melamine, it includes polyvinyl chloride, it includes polystyrene. So there's other chemicals and materials of concern in a separate list. And then Food Packaging Forum, a nonprofit organization based in Europe, has a comprehensive list of priority substances that they've identified in food packaging products, which is all part of the restricted substance list. So if you have any of those chemicals intentionally added, the product wouldn't meet the criteria. If you have any contaminants that meet that restricted substance list above 100 part per million, also would not meet the criteria. So then there's a chemical hazard evaluation level. And as Sue mentioned, the certification has 3 different levels: silver, gold, and platinum. At the silver level, it's evaluated using our GreenScreen list translator framework, which I'll say more about. And then to get the gold and platinum, the individual chemicals and their hazards have to be evaluated. And this is a tiered process to go from a more accessible, less costly approach in terms of avoiding chemicals on the GreenScreen list translator to a full evaluation of all the chemical hazards. And I can answer any questions about these details, put them into the chat. So GreenScreen list translator then goes beyond the restricted substances list, and it is encompassing all the chemical list from authoritative bodies that meets the GreenScreen benchmark 1 criteria. So you've got California Proposition 65, carcinogens, and mutagens and reproductive toxicants. You can see you've got lists from the European Union, the UN Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, etc. So these are all lists of chemicals that are carcinogens, mutagens, reproductive toxicants, developmental toxicants. You've got endocrine disruptors, and you've got the persistent bioaccumulative toxic chemicals, the PBTs. So all these other chemicals that may not already be captured in those chemical classes as part of the restricted substance list. So that's a huge threshold to get over. So basically, known problematic chemicals cannot be in the product to get to the silver certification. And then in addition, there's analytical testing requirements. So we require testing for total fluorine because of all the concerns around PFAS. Then there's specific content testing for the polymeric materials, biological materials, and coatings. And then there's migration testing for also metal alloys and ceramics and glass. And then recycled content is certainly a challenge because typically organizations don't know all the chemicals that are in their recycled content. So if there's post-industrial recycled content, for example, all the materials have to be well-defined and fully characterized. In other words, they have to meet all the other requirements. Like recycled materials do not get a pass, especially for the polymeric materials and biological materials. For glass and metal, because of the processes of recycling them, we do allow for recycled content. Ceramics are generally not being recycled, so we don't have an allowance for recycled content. So glad to answer more questions. I also put Agnes Chiang email here. She's our technical researcher at Clean Production Action and knows all the nitty-gritty details of GreenScreen Certified, and she or I would be glad to help, as would Sue and her team. And with that, I'm really happy to pass this over to you, Manasa, and congratulations to having a GreenScreen Certified Platinum product. I'll stop share. There we go.
Thank you so much. And that was so wonderful and thorough and exactly what we need for brands who are trying to do better, but often don't have a path there. So thanks to you and CEH for putting together such a stringent protocol and kind of certification. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Dr. Manasa Mantravadi. I'm a pediatrician by training, but I kind of stumbled into the world of products when I really quickly realized that there was a disconnect between our medical recommendations and new science and actually what industry was offering to consumers, to commercial dining spaces. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm the founder of Ahimsa. Let's see. Hopefully you all can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Let me just go to slideshow. Hopefully that works. Okay, wonderful. Pop you guys up here. So this is our line of stainless steel dinnerware and foodware for kids, specifically in school cafeterias. A really quick background to me: I'm a pediatrician by training, and in 2018 there was a study, a policy statement that talked about endocrine disrupting chemicals, carcinogens, really harmful chemicals that are found in foodware. And the American Academy of Pediatrics is a group of 67,000 pediatricians coming out with a formal policy recommendation that guides the work that we do as pediatricians. And when they, basically started to raise the red flag of these chemicals affecting children's health, and recommending to use well-known and tried and true tested materials like glass and stainless steel, I just felt very compelled to create a solution because I had science over here, and my roots in India, where stainless steel is the norm and material of choice, to launch a company, not knowing anything about business, but really feeling compelled to still create this solution to advocate for children's health at scale. So that's essentially what happened. So sorry about that. I immigrated from India, and you can see this is actually my, oops, I'm so sorry. This is my a picture of me when I was little and eating off of steel dishes, because that's what we do. And so I grew up this way, and then I had children of my own. And in that case, I went and did what a lot of American parents do: go to the big box stores, and all there is to feed your children are plastic dishes, bottles, cups, plates, all of the stuff. And so I did the same thing. And then my mom scolded me and said, "Oh my goodness, what are you doing? You have to use steel. There must be chemicals in this plastic stuff." So I kind of went back to my roots and used steel for my own children. And then 5 years later, science proved my mother correct. And so the American Academy of Pediatrics really came out and said very prominently in a policy statement, the very same thing that my mother had warned me about. And pediatrician friends also kind of said, "Oh my gosh, what are you going to do with these formal health policies? Where is the steel?" And so that's why I launched a consumer product that is steel and titanium, the same materials that we use in indwelling medical implants, to launch a line of stainless steel dishes for kids. But I realized very quickly that while the home is important, the schools are even more important because they feed masses of children. So launched a line for schools specifically. So I want to really just pay attention to the most important part of what I bring to the table, which is health. We talk about plastic and its effect on the environment, and I think that's well known to the public, but really what I am here to do is to educate the masses on the health implications of these plastic chemicals. So in 2018, which is where my story started, the American Academy of Pediatrics rang the kind of raised the red flag. In 2020, the Endocrine Society had an entire basically playbook on discussing endocrine disrupting chemicals and why we shouldn't be using them. And then the United Nations just last March really discussed having a global treaty to decrease the impact of plastic as a major source of health harm to people. So how is this bad? I think that's the most important thing that I can hopefully teach today, is We know it's bad for the planet, but what do we know about how it actually affects our health? So in general, we think about cancer-causing chemicals, chemicals that mess with endocrine disruption. I'll focus on that because that's the key word that a lot of people hear but don't quite understand. So in general, the endocrine system or the hormone system is a series of glands that lives within our body. And it's really a very intricate, well-oiled machine that tells each of our glands to produce certain hormones to then allow children's brains to grow, allows your body to secrete insulin when you consume, carbs and metabolize that in an appropriate way. So it is a very intricate, specific system that happens. These chemicals in plastic look like those hormones. And instead of the normal hormone going into the end organ, these chemicals, as depicted by these, the negative connotation here, essentially disturb this normal process. When we think about hormones, I think most people think about adults. They think about fertility. They think about maybe thyroid hormone. But these are incredibly important and critical for children's brains to grow and bodies to develop in the normal, appropriate way. And so these chemicals interfere and can cause abnormalities in growth, immunity, brain development, cardiovascular health, puberty. We're seeing children undergo puberty as early as 6 now, which leads to future fertility problems. We see obesity, morbid obesity and type 2 diabetes, things that we just have never seen before in children happening at such a scale that we understand that genetics did not change in a generation, and rather there is something else going on that is a bit more kind of low level of exposure that's happening daily. The one thing I will also say about children is that per body surface area, they consume more chemicals when they're eating than their adult counterparts, because their bodies are so little and the exposure is so much. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that are designed for children are made of these chemicals. And so I want to just call it to attention that these cafeteria trays that have not changed for many years are still in use. And so really, the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with a policy statement that recommended glass or stainless steel. And they said, please avoid plastic. And if you are going to use plastic, please avoid exposing it to heat, like the dishwasher or microwave. And especially don't use it past when it's etched and scratched. So we know, especially for commercial dining, that's impossible to not wash those and expose them to heat. So really, almost every single school in America right now is not following the most recent health guidelines, which is concerning because we are feeding the masses of children. And so for us, it was also important to not just, put out products that are better for their health, but also ensure that commercial dining spaces are saving money, in this case, schools, and also to educate and advocate. So we have this wonderful curriculum that we're developing with the Smurfs to help children understand behavioral change and the why behind the change in their school. So it's not just, oh, here's a tray that's now made of a different material, but here is this concept of reuse. Here's this concept of understanding what goes in our body and understanding that the things that we use can affect our own body and also the one planet that we have. So we've found incredible success, and really kudos to CEH for having a wonderful disposable to reusable program that helps schools transition to a more sustainable, safe cafeteria that is in line with medical health policy. So thank you for that. And then, of course, just a quick word on the cafeteria is the greatest source of carbon emission. So not only are we helping health harm, we are also helping mitigate the risk of harm to our planet. So to Mark's point, our steel is actually made from 100% recycled steel. So we do not source new steel, and we do testing at the level of raw materials all the way down to the final product, because I'm obsessed with quality and safety because I am a physician by training, and the word Ahimsa means avoiding harm. So it's very important for me for our products to really be avoiding harm for children's health and for the planet. And then the last few slides, it just, again, I really want to talk about American Academy of Pediatrics' focus on environmental health as a priority for the Academy. So again, children consume more food and drink, more water than adults do in proportion to their weight. That's why they're more vulnerable than adults for these environmental hazards. They're still developing, and they're at crucial ages of growth and development, in which especially these hormones are incredibly important for them to be developing in these critical windows appropriately. And then lastly, they have little control over their environments, whether it's the toys that they're playing with, or the foodware that they're eating off of, or the food that is being served in the schools. They don't have control. So it's really up to us to make better choices. And then again, in general, there's a lot of good stuff that comes out from using reusables, saving, a carbon impact, saving money, creating new jobs. So lots of great things. So that's why for me, it was really important for the GreenScreen Certified. And when I realized that there was something happening, I said, oh, I want to test, I want to understand, I want third-party validation. And it was really hard as a new brand to have a clear understanding of your roadmap, because there is no national standard, there is no national protocol. So having something like this really now helps what I believe manufacturers and brands do better, because I do believe that there are a lot of people who want to do better. They just don't know how. I have a sense of that because I went to medical school and understand these health implications. And so for me, it was maybe a little bit easier to understand the science behind it, but for most brands and manufacturers, they don't. So again, Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word meaning avoiding harm. And so that GreenScreen certification was really helping our promise from both sourcing, production, contamination, packaging, transport. All of that is very important to us. This is just a slide to show that the GreenScreen certification can help brands who really are promising their end consumers about the promises that they're making. And then we already have a no-no list of the things that we will never use in our products. And so having a third-party validation was extremely helpful to be able to do that. And then the last thing I'll say is, while this is one of our pilot schools, and this is the head of school, so it might be unusual to see kids excited about lunch trays. But when they learn about why we made the change, they're really excited about it. Kids are our future. They're stewards of the planet. They are stewards of their own health. And it's been really exciting to watch this simple, scalable solution not only protect children and our planet, but really generate this behavioral change in students across the country. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you to both organizations for creating such a wonderful certification.
Thank you so much, Manasa. That was great. Really excited to hear about all your company's been doing. And I am ready to turn it over to Julia.
Great. Thank you so much. And that was so great to hear about all that, Manasa. And congratulations for being the first to certify. So thanks for inviting me to speak today on this webinar. And I was really honored to actually participate in this certification development work group. I'm Julia Wolfe. I run the environmentally preferable products procurement program for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Next slide, please. So I just want to give you a bit of information about us. I work for the Commonwealth's Operational Services Division and been here for about 12 years. And we're the state agency that sets up and manages statewide contracts for goods and services. We have about 100 statewide contracts with over $2 billion in spend. And note that we actually don't purchase anything except directly related to the running of our agency, but we set up master agreements that all executive agencies have to use, and that all other public entities listed here on the slide, and some nonprofits may use these contracts, but they're not actually required to use them. So we have a robust environmental purchasing program that's been around for almost 30 years, and we work off of an executive order signed in 2009 to establish an environmental policy for the Commonwealth. And OSD administers this executive order, and we report annually on our progress. So I am actually in the middle of all the annual reporting right now. A main focus of the executive order was toxics. And in 2009, we actually established the Toxic Reduction Task Force, which I helped co-chair. Next slide, please. So this is a multi-agency task force that comes together every few months to identify products with chemicals of concern, and we explore alternatives. And we've tackled green cleaning products, safer sanitizers and disinfectants, safer furniture products, safer carpet and flooring, safer firefighting foam. And most recently, the task force assisted in reviewing OSD's PFAS-free buying guide, which we published. Next slide, please. So procurement staff, we love third-party certifications, and they hold a really important role for us. In effect, they help by outsourcing the environmental review for products or services. And that time, it's a procurement person just doesn't have that time to do, nor the expertise, as Mark discussed in his slides. So we research and then specify third-party certifications that meet our needs. And on the screen are some that we require or desire in our contracts. And if you could click next, please, that'd be great. And GreenScreen is one of them. And as I said, I was able to participate in the standard setting work group, and now really thrilled to be able to include this on our list. Next slide, please. So as more products become certified, there'll be options for institutions, schools to request really safer food packaging, serviceware, and cookware. And note that OSD recently published an article in our By the Way newsletter, which actually goes out to about 30,000 people. But it's an interview with Mark Rossi about GreenScreen and its importance. And it's a great piece that's part of an ongoing focus for us on the importance that third-party certifications play in procurement. I also wanted to mention that our Department of Environmental Protection has been working with stakeholders in the development of guidance on how restaurants, colleges and universities, and other food service entities can transition away from single-use foodware containers to reusable containers. And their work is going to result in the development of best management practices for local health officials and food services. And they were very excited about this new certification, and hopefully some of them are on the call today. And I look forward to sharing their recommendations when they're complete. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned in a previous slide, we report annually on progress for Executive Order 515, and we try to document 4 things: environmental product and service spend, any spend we can associate with products and services. Savings that we can associate with products and services, reductions in metric tons of carbon equivalent, and tons of waste diverted to recycling. And part of our spend reporting includes products that are GreenScreen certified. So we encourage buyers to ask for GreenScreen certified products. We've already included GreenScreen for firefighting foam in our public safety contracts. And we have included GreenScreen for single-use food serviceware in our food service supplies and equipment statewide contract. And we'll be adding this one as well as a desirable criteria. So what this does for buyers is it takes the guesswork out of finding products that are free of PFAS and thousands of other chemicals of concern. So as more products are offered under these certifications, we can then evaluate whether or not to make it a requirement in our contracts. Next slide, please. So that's actually it for me. Here's my contact information and links to many of the EPD publications that may be of interest to this community. And of course, if you're interested, please sign up for our excellent and very professional newsletter that comes out every few months. Some really good information in there. And a huge thank you to Sue and Mark and the rest of the CEH and CPA teams, and Manasa for being the first to certify under the standard. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Julia. So yeah, it's a great panel of speakers here. I hope you got a lot of information about what was in the certification, and maybe we can jump to the questions right now. We've got a number that have come in. I mean, one of the first most basic ones is, why are all these chemicals allowed in food packaging in the first place? Does one of you want to attempt to answer that one?
Well, I can start, and glad to turn it over then to the other, to Manasa and Julia to add to it. But so our regulations for food products regulated by the Food and Drug Administration is a risk-based system. So it's hazard times exposure equals risk. And so there's a presumption of saying, well, a little bit of this is not going to cause harm. And certainly what Manasa presented about endocrine disrupting chemicals really overturns that. So the reason that GreenScreen Certified is important, and what CEH and CPA have done, is to take a precautionary approach, which is the best and most effective way to reduce risk is to eliminate the hazard in the first place. So our structure and our approach is reduce hazard, therefore you don't have to worry about, eliminate the hazard, therefore you don't have to worry about exposure. And you don't have to get into these timely and costly risk assessments that are often used to justify continued use of toxic chemicals. So this goes well beyond any regulatory framework in the world in terms of what's required for food products. Manasa, you want?
Yeah, I can kind of piggyback off that, Mark. Thank you for pointing that out. You know, the FDA is really called the Food and Drug Administration. And unfortunately, a lot of the resources and support go to the drug stuff, which is important. But this is distinctly different than other parts of the world. So our food portion, you know, one of the biggest things is this generally regarded as safe. So there are more than 10,000 additives in our food system that have essentially been adopted and accepted since the 1950s. And those regulations haven't really changed since that time, for all the reasons that Mark said. It's almost like innocent until proven guilty, these chemicals. And this is inherently the reverse in Europe. Europe has a European Food Safety Authorization. So their kind of governing body is different for the drug side and the food side. So it is just an unfortunate reality. It's not that the FDA are horrible people and whatnot. It's just that the resources and allocations and some of the practices don't look to see what they can cause, like what these chemicals can cause. And it's really more reactive than proactive, which is why I really love having these certifications who are looking at the most stringent definitions of what harm can be and expected harm at every degree of exposure. So.
All right, thanks. So we have another question about, can you elaborate on what happens if a product with post-consumer content wants to become certified? That's for Mark. Yes.
So it depends on the material, right? So if it's a polymeric or biological material, like just if you're making it from polypropylene, that recycled content for the polypropylene has to be fully characterized. And I would say for plastics, it's a real challenge to get that information around what is specifically going into the product, unless it's a closed loop system where you're taking back product, right? A polypropylene product that you manufactured and you know is in it, and you take that back and recycle it. So that's a real challenge. But as Manasa mentioned, like metal, we allow for recycled content for metal and for glass. So that's not a problem. That can be fully, we see that because of the process, the high heat that's involved in recycling those materials, that the chemistries get volatilized in the recycling process. So it depends on the material. It's much more challenging for the plastics and biologicals like bamboo, but it's certainly clearly viable for glass and metal, and ceramics just are, it's not an issue because ceramics aren't being recycled. And Sue, of course, you're expert in the standard as well, so feel free to add into it.
Okay, yeah, I can jump in when needed, but I think you did a great job. So there's a question about when plastic food serviceware is exposed to heat or other stressors, is the concern that the chemicals then can more easily leach into the food or into, say, the water supply if washed in the dishwasher?
I can kind of high level answer that. So I think when the Academy or other, so I want to mention, I always talk about the American Academy of Pediatrics, but this is very much echoed by Endocrine Society, American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, World Health Organization. So this is not in, this is like in unison among all these medical organizations globally. The practices, you can, the world is made of chemicals. We can be exposed to, like, we are made of chemicals. That's okay. It's when these harmful chemicals have exposure, that's when we get into trouble. That exposure can come from lots of different ways. Inhalation, ingestion, absorption. So there are multiple ways and this can happen. In this case, we really think about ingestion for foodware the most. And so that when the food hits that, plastic or other kind of toxic chemicals, there is some degree of migration, which is why they chose glass and stainless steel, because those materials are inert, and the material that's in, that glass and steel, it doesn't interact with the food or any other environment, which is why we use it in the hospital settings and in indwelling medical implants. It's inert. And so that degree of leaching is not necessarily like there, whereas in plastic and these other chemicals, that can already at baseline leach. What makes it worse, though, is things like heat exposure and this etching and scratching. And so, but again, those can also go into the water system and then, be exposed in a different way. So I think the answer is both, but kind of the immediacy is exposing and migrating into the food people are eating and consuming. So for the purposes of this discussion, certainly foodware, it's an important, point of migration.
Okay, thanks for that. I was about to ask a question for Julia. It looks like she might be typing an answer into the chat. Would you prefer to do it verbally, Julia?
Yeah, I can do it verbally. So the question is, to what extent do OSD guidelines with third-party certifications have the ability to influence non-state agencies, for example, private universities? And, our executive order is really the only, the executive agencies are required to comply. But, we're integrating those requirements into our statewide contracts. We probably have about 12 statewide contracts that we consider all green, right? Everything you purchase off of them are considered environmentally preferable. And we've developed, standards, certifications for that. So if anybody's purchasing, non-execs are purchasing from the contracts, they're benefiting from it. When it comes to private universities, I just reference our specifications that can be used. We take a lot of time to, really look at the specifications in many of our contracts. We have an all green cleaners contract, for example, FAC 118. And it took us a year to put together the specifications. We've got like 18 pages of specifications. So for a university, we might recommend taking a look at the specs, because there's been a lot of work that has gone into identifying those specifications, the third party, choosing the third party certifications, and making sure that, whether it's desirable or required on the contract, which requires a market analysis, make sure that we have enough products there. So hopefully that answers your question.
Great, thank you. So there's a question about, it says we're incentivizing local and hyper-local makers. How much would it cost for the certification? Can we make it affordable for local micro manufacturers of sustainable products?
Yes, so the certification is very affordable in terms of the costs that a company would have to pay to Clean Production Action or to Center for Environmental Health, and certainly glad to take up specifics on the pricing offline. There are, the pieces that you would have to go through anyway as part of, making sure that you're using FDA approved materials, right? So like certainly a starting point for any standard, and our standard is you have to be in compliance with all laws and regulations. So there's selecting those materials, and then once those materials are selected, is walking that through the process. So we would be, glad to work with local manufacturers and walk them through the process, and to work with them to make this accessible. So we really would love to have those conversations.
Great, thanks, Mark. So there's also a question about how long does it take to get certified?
So the certification process, can go anywhere from 3 months to over a year. And the challenge that happens is really, one is knowing everything that's intentionally added into the product. And so that requires getting that information from suppliers. And then the other is doing the product testing. And so the typically supply chain work is the piece that takes the longest. And there was a question in the chat around, can other materials beyond glass and stainless steel be certified? And I would say yes. I mean, we have certified biological and polymeric materials under the single use certification. So clearly polymeric materials can get through. You would have to then meet the reusability criteria on that. And I think, Manasa, you could also say more just about, the process, your experience with getting through the certification process, and what you needed to do and how long that takes. Because for us, once we have all the information, it's a relatively straightforward process, but it is that process on the manufacturer/brand side of getting all that information together.
Yeah, I think that's really important for brands to understand, because listen, while we are the first, we don't want to be the only, because it really is a big problem that we need to address. So I encourage and welcome companies to do this and follow in, I hope, our good footsteps that we're creating. I think in general for brands, what we need to, if you are a brand owner, there's a few things. Number one is really the compliance of your own manufacturer, making sure that those raw materials are coming in and that you're doing testing at that stage. And then also making sure that the manufacturing process doesn't introduce contamination. Because even with steel, if depending on if it has welding and has a separate handle, you'll notice like none of our products have handles, because that can introduce lead, which we know is harmful to children's health. So I think understanding what you are making, who is making it, and how they're making it, and where those checks and balances are very important. So everything from testing protocol to inspections are critical. Once you start to really do that, the GreenScreen certification becomes actually pretty easy. And even if you don't have good testing protocols or don't know where to start, GreenScreen certification can help you understand what you should be testing and what you should be looking for. So I would say that that's kind of, for us, it was a relatively simple thing because we were already doing a lot of those. But for brands who don't, if you're starting at baseline 0, I would look to the GreenScreen certification to even implement some of those, because you'll need it for certification anyway. So it's a good process to do. And the last thing I'll say for business owners is the cost per, like, to do something like this is an investment into your business, right? So it's an investment of getting the GreenScreen certification, but it also, to Julia's point, opens the doors for lots of, opportunity for your business. So you can feel good that you're doing the right thing. It really isn't a major cost. And even the continued testing price per unit hits our bottom line very minimally, but can really expand your opportunities greatly.
Great, thanks for that. There's actually a follow-up question for you, Manasa, about somebody from a school that's using large stainless steel trays that are very heavy when stacked. They're asking how heavy they are and are they tested for nickel, a common allergen? What's the best way to deter a school district from using melamine? That's
get on a call with me. No, I'm just kidding. So I think, usability has to be a thing, right? Like, so finances and logistics have to be a part of this, not just the science, but we have to make sure that the science can be implemented in a cost-effective and, in a way that was accepted by the end users. Ours are made to be lighter on purpose for this reason. We have a residential line that is much heavier because, it's meant to serve like 2 or 3 kids in a family at a family dining table versus commercial. And if you feel the weight of this in comparison to like the melamine ones that are out there, they're pretty comparable. So I can only attest to like what we do. And how can you convince them of the melamine? Science, to me, science and data, evidence-based decision-making is kind of like how I think we all function here on the call. And so really pointing to your decision makers, the real science behind this and the actual policy recommendations is one of the easiest ways to convince some of these decision makers.
Thanks. This one's a little bit of a big question. It says, can you please speak to the cost of implementation of all of this? This certification is fantastic and identifies all the undesirable chemistries that may lurk in our food contact products. Sourcing clean materials and the analytical testing to verify their absence is a tremendous cost. We all know the cost of living is at an all-time high. What type of policy and education work is needed to democratize safer materials for consumers and make them as affordable as what we try to displace? I know that's a huge question. Anyone have thoughts that they want?
I mean, I'll just kick off the process for us on the panel. So one is the cost, right, becomes so much more affordable as you get more demand, right? So we are right now at the beginning of this curve, right, where Ahimsa is part of the innovators, right? We need more adopters. We need to get much more traction because, as we know, as you get much more traction, the cost of the implementation of all this work and the learning that all of the leaders do just becomes much more affordable. So all of us are leaders in trying to make this transition happen. But like if like, all the states that I had listed and we work with and that CH list works with and institutions start to make this shift, right, then all of these factors become much more affordable. Both the knowledge gains and the knowledge sharing, as well as the cost of materials and the cost of testing, right? All of that just goes dramatically down as we start to move to greater scale. But we're at the beginning of this wave and we're really creating that wave. And there's efforts. I know that there's efforts to come up with different cost sharing strategies, with CH and Manasa are very familiar with that. You could share as well.
Yeah, I just think the big picture is like, think through like organic food. That was a very innovative thing that brands did early on. And the delta between organic food and non-organic food was very high. There's still a delta, but there's more mass. There's more players in the market. You can now get, produce that's organic at Costco for a family for a much cost affordable. So we're just at the tip of the iceberg. So we really do need everyone help in the adoption of this, in the production of this, in the certification of this, so we can shift the market towards everybody using and producing safer, sustainable materials.
Yeah, I know. And I know we're at time. I got so into the list of questions and the responses that I realized that we're at the hour already. And I know there's a lot more questions, but I think, you know, to end on this note, it's really important that I think everybody continues to raise awareness about this, to talk about this, to ask about what is going into these products, and ideally asking for these products to get certified in order to really shift the market. And I really want to thank all our panelists. You did a fantastic job, and we will follow up with resources and the recording when it's available. So thank you so much for joining us, and there will be definitely more in this conversation.
Thank you, Sue and CEH and Manasa and Julia. Bye, everyone.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.